Fox News alert, the New York Times is making a bombshell new claim about the deadly Benghazi terror attack. The stunning new report, released just a short time ago, contradicts many of the findings that we have heard over the last 15 months about who was behind that attack that killed 4 Americans, including Ambassador Chris Stevens. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a brand new hour inside America's News headquarters. I'm Jamie Colby.
And I'm Greg Jarrett. That report making a widely discredited claim that the assault was fueled by anger over an American-made videotape criticizing Islam and not the work of Al-Qaeda or any other international terror group. Now, the new findings completely contradicting the assessments of some of our most senior lawmakers, including the chairman of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Congressman Mike Rogers, who had this to say about who was behind the assault. Listen.
It is accurate that of the group that is being targeted by the Bureau at this point, there's strong Al-Qaeda ties.
Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Harridge joins us now live on the phone. Catherine, you have been reporting on this story since the day after the attack. What's your assessment of the New York Times claim here?
Well, Greg, thank you. Congressman Mike Rogers, as head of the House Intelligence Committee, has regular classified briefings, and more significantly, he also has access to the raw intelligence data so that he can make his own assessments. And one day after the attack, he told Fox News on the record that there was no link to this anti-Islam video, that the assault was a premeditated terrorist attack. And since he has maintained in on-the-record interviews with Fox News that it was an Al-Qaeda-led assault, and that the individuals being targeted by the FBI have strong Al-Qaeda ties. We have confirmed separately through intelligence contacts that 2 of the primary suspects include individuals with historic ties to the Al-Qaeda senior leadership in Pakistan. They include Sufyan bin Kumu, a former Guantanamo detainee, and Faraj al-Shalabi, who at one time was a former bodyguard for the Al-Qaeda network. So that is a significant body of evidence to assess when considering this new report by the New York Times, Greg.
And is there any evidence, Catherine, that the video was to blame for the attack?
What's striking in the New York Times story is that it seems to just make a passing reference
on board, getting this package for their patients and promoting it in their waiting rooms because doctors want to see their patients get well.
In Benghazi, that there were 5 mortars that were fired, and they came down on the annex in under a minute, and 3 were accurate. That takes premeditation, it takes advanced planning, but more specifically, it takes training. And this would fly in the face, or at least contrast, with the suggestion that this was somehow spontaneous and a response to the anti-Islam video. In addition, Fox News was able to review the findings of an independent data mining firm which assessed the social media traffic in Benghazi in the 24 hours leading up to the attack and the 24 hours after the attack. And significantly, the first reference to this anti-Islam video was in the day following. It was a retweet of a Russia Today story. So again, this does not comport with the idea that it was a response to this anti-Islam video, Greg.
Catherine Harridge, thank you very, very much for that information. Appreciate it. Jamie?
Thank you for having me.
Well, we want to take a further look at these shocking new claims. Let's turn to Fred Fleitz, a former CIA senior analyst and managing editor at Lignet.com. Thank you very much, Fred, for being with us. This story just arising in the last hour. What's your analysis, first of all, of the New York Times report?
It's good to be here, Jamie. I read this report and I was really incredulous. It seems to be an effort to revive this discredited theory that the anti-Islam video was behind it. But when you read the article closely, there's various statements where the author seems to downplay the link to terrorist groups. He says that the main leader of the attacks did not have clear terrorist links, but he also says that this leader participated in a convoy of trucks in Benghazi in June 2012, where they were flying the black radical Islamist flag. He says Anwar al-Sharia the group that participated in the attacks does not have ties to Al-Qaeda. But even CNN does not agree with that. There's a piece on their website that ran earlier this month that says groups sympathetic to Al-Qaeda have a significant presence in Benghazi, most notably Anwar al-Sharia, an umbrella group that includes militant outfits suspected of launching the attack that killed 4 Americans at the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. CNN doesn't agree with the New York Times. The ties with this group, I think, are fairly well established with Al-Qaeda.
Let me ask you, as a former CIA senior analyst, the evidence that Catherine Harridge lays out for us, including what was found at the site of the consulate embassy, the in-depth report that was done, the testimony and statements of members, high-ranking ones at that, of the Intelligence Committee, and then all of a sudden this report that contradicts so much of it. Who had more evidence behind their statements?
Well, Catherine Harridge makes a very important point in what she just told you, that Congressman Mike Rogers has access to classified information. He's talked to government officials, and this article is based on interviews with Libyans. Most of the Libyans deny they had anything to do with this attack. Well, of course they're going to say that. They don't want to be prosecuted. They don't want to be arrested. I think the evidence is fairly overwhelming. I worked with Chairman Rogers on the House Intelligence Committee. I have the utmost respect for him. If he says Al-Qaeda was behind this, I believe him.
Homeland Security member Pete King, Congressman from New York, agrees with what Mike Rogers' analysis was and discredits the New York Times report as well. Is this irresponsible journalism on the part of the New York Times, and is it dangerous to us as a nation?
I thought it was a politicized article. It tries to say that Anwar al-Sharia, that the Republican attempts to tie that to terrorism is a stretch, when even the CNN says that they're at least sympathetic to Al-Qaeda. It also leaves out a lot of other information. For example, Anwar Zawahiri, the head of Al-Qaeda, called for terrorist attacks against Western targets on September 11, 2012. He did that the day before in retaliation to the death of his deputy. That isn't mentioned in this article. I think that's a key data point.
It's interesting you bring up the point about having access to classified information. Mike Rogers would have access to things that we may never know. But in your experience as a CIA analyst, a former analyst, does this pass the smell test?
It really doesn't. I think there were a lot of omissions, and I think that there were statements about terrorism that simply didn't add up. The article tries to claim that Al-Qaeda operatives were not present in Benghazi. But if you read this carefully, it doesn't represent the fact that Al-Qaeda has changed its tactics. It is now a decentralized organization. It is relying on affiliated organizations and franchises. It is encouraging terrorist attacks through this decentralized organization. That should have been discussed in this article so the reader would understand the real threat.
Interesting. Then we encourage everyone to take a very close look at it and even go back to FoxNews.com to see Catherine and other reports of FoxNews.com and broadcast journalists to see what we had uncovered and what the intelligence community had uncovered. Thank you very much, Fred Fleitz. Good to have you here.